John Whitaker had lived in Maple Crest Estates for nearly 20 years. His porch had seen birthday parties, summer storms, and quiet mornings with coffee in the newspaper. It was nothing fancy, just a couple of rocking chairs, an American flag on a short pole, and a hanging fern that danced in the breeze like it owned the place. That's why the envelope hit him like a slap. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon, tucked neatly into his mailbox, bearing the all-too-familiar HOA letterhead. The paper inside smelled like toner and trouble. Violation notice. It read in bold letters. John read it once, then twice. He blinked. Your front porch is in violation of HOA. Regulation 1 for B, unapproved decorative items visible from the curb. The flagpole is non-standard. The wind chimes exceed decibel allowance. Hanging flora must be in compliance with approved landscaping aesthetics. You are required to correct these infractions within 7 days or face a $100 fine. At the bottom, in scripted blue ink, was a signature he knew all too well, Susan Bentley. HOA committee member, compliance lead. John chuckled dryly. You've got to be kidding me. He folded the letter and stepped onto the very porch in question. The breeze nudged the wind chimes gently, not a clatter, just a soft tinkling. The kind you could barely hear unless you were already annoyed and looking for something to blame. From across the street. As if on cue, Susan Bentley emerged from her house like a nosy specter. She wore her usual pastel cardigan and carried a clipboard like a weapon. Her eyes met John's for a moment, cold, clinical, victorious. She turned without a wave and disappeared inside. John muttered under his breath. She must have taken that photo from the sidewalk, probably had a measuring tape in one hand. He walked back inside, holding the letter like a ticking time bomb. He considered calling someone on the HOA board, but they were all intimidated by Susan. She'd been on every committee, chaired every subcommittee, and probably knew more about the rulebook than the person who wrote it. That night, John sat at the kitchen table, staring at the notice with a beer in one hand and his reading glasses sliding down his nose. He didn't care much about politics or HOA drama, but he cared about principle. This wasn't about a flagpole or a fern, it was about power, and Susan wanted all of it. The front door opened, and in walked Alex, John's 28-year-old son, who had recently moved back in after a cross-country job change. You wouldn't believe traffic today, Alex said, tossing his bag onto a chair. What's that? John held up the notice like a badge of shame. Apparently, I'm a porch criminal. Alex took the letter, scanned it, and raised an eyebrow. Wind chimes, really? She says they exceed the decibel limit. Didn't know you needed a sound permit to enjoy a breeze. John shrugged. She's been looking for a reason. Ever since I voted against her pool renovation budget. Alex set the paper down. You know, this is exactly why I submitted my name for the HOA board election. John blinked. You what? I didn't tell you earlier, Alex said, smiling. There's an opening for HOA president. I figured someone with a sense of reason should give it a shot. John sat back, a slow grin spreading across his face. Well, son, looks like Susan just picked a fight with the wrong porch. The chimes jingled again outside, as if in applause. Susan Bentley had a reputation that preceded her, and it wasn't for her cookies at HOA potlucks. She was a stickler, a perfectionist, and a self-declared protector of the community standard for years. She had ruled Maple Crest Estates, not with charm, but with citations, complaint forms, and endless bylaws that seemed to appear out of thin air. She once fined a neighbor $50 for inconsistent mulch tone. Another got slapped with a warning for leaving garden gnomes out past Halloween. John had tolerated her antics for years, like a stubborn fly buzzing around a peaceful picnic. But this time, she'd crossed a line. The porch had been his peaceful haven, a spot he built after retirement to enjoy what he'd earned. The flagpole, the fern, the chimes, they weren't just decor. They were part of his rhythm, his peace. And now Susan was threatening that because she didn't like the way it looked from the street. John knew it wasn't about rules, it was personal. A week before the letter arrived, John had spoken up at the last HOA meeting. Susan had pushed an expensive proposal to redesign the community pool area, using HOA funds. New umbrellas, stone tile, color-coded deck chairs, all cosmetic. She called it necessary modernization. John called it what it was, fluff. He voted against it, voicing concerns about increasing dues just to upgrade something that already worked fine. The proposal failed by one vote, and now, magically, his porch was out of compliance. That's when it clicked. She's punishing me, John told Alex the next morning as they stood in the garage, rereading the violation letter. The porch thing. It's payback. Alex sipped his coffee, thinking she's used to getting her way, and she probably didn't expect you to push back. You're quiet, respectful. John smirked, until someone pokes the bear. Alex tapped the side of the paper. You're not the only one she's gone after. When I was out jogging the other day, a lady named Carla flagged me down. Said Susan tried to fine her last month for having unapproved patio furniture. She's drunk on power, John muttered. Somebody's got to sober her up. Alex nodded slowly. Well, good news is, elections for HOA president are next month. John raised a brow. Wait, so you're serious about running? Dead serious, Alex replied. I'm young, but I've got project management experience. I know how to read contracts, and I don't bully people over ferns. John chuckled. You've got my vote. That evening, as the sun dipped low over Maple Crest, John took a slow walk through the neighborhood with Alex. They passed yards that were immaculate and others that had seen better days. But everywhere they went, people smiled at John, waved, nodded, even whispered. She really got you, huh? One man said with a laugh, pointing at John's flagpole. You should see what she tried with me, said another, gesturing toward a bird. Said it encouraged pests. I've lived here for 15 years. People weren't just annoyed, they were tired, exhausted by the drama, the pettiness, the constant scrutiny. Susan had ruled by fear, and her grip was slipping. By the time they returned home, Alex was already sketching ideas for a more transparent HOA system. Digital notices, open forums, anonymous surveys, a way to give power back to the people who actually lived in the neighborhood, not just the ones with clipboards. Let her play her games, Alex said. If she wants to use the rules to attack people, fine. I'll use the rules to fix the system. John nodded, looking at his porch. Now Bear, just for the time being, she may have filed the complaint, John said, but she just woke up a fight she won't win. The next HOA meeting had all the markings of a small-town courtroom, drama, folding chairs packed wall-to-wall in the Maple Crest clubhouse, neighbors clutching reusable water bottles and purses like shields, and at the center of it all, Susan Bentley, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the room like a hawk circling a field mouse. John sat near the back, arms crossed, quiet but watchful. Next to him, Alex scrolled through his tablet, pulling up the HOA regulations and the community charter. This wasn't just a meeting, it was going to be a moment. Susan stood at the podium promptly at 6 p.m., her lips curved into a tight smile. Before we begin with the general agenda, she said, tapping her clipboard, I'd like to bring to the board's attention a serious and recurring violation that threatens the aesthetic harmony of Maple Crest Estates. A murmur rolled through the room. John raised an eyebrow. She was wasting no time. Susan turned toward a large foam board set on an easel. On it were several high-resolution photos of John's porch. One showed the flagpole from the curb. Another had a red circle around his wind chimes. A third, unbelievably, showed the outline of a lawn chair with a coffee cup resting on the armrest. This, Susan said dramatically, is what happens when residents begin to ignore the standards we've all agreed to uphold. Looks like a porch to me, someone muttered. Susan cleared her throat sharply. Mr. Whitaker has been warned, and yet his disregard for compliance is emblematic of a larger issue, selective enforcement. If we let one homeowner bend the rules, what's to stop others? She turned, eyes locking on John's. John stood up. Slowly, may I speak? The board chair, Diane, an older woman, often caught between appeasing Susan and keeping peace. Briefly, John moved to the front of the room, hands in his pockets. For 20 years I've maintained my home, paid my dues, and respected this community. That porch, he pointed at the photo. It's where I sat with my wife before she passed. It's where I talked to neighbors, read books, wave at kids on bikes. I didn't know hanging a fern and a flag made me a threat to the harmony around here. Applause broke out in the back. Diane looked visibly uncomfortable. Before she could respond, Alex stood up. My name is Alex Whitaker, he said, stepping forward, and I just submitted my nomination to run for HOA president. Heads turned. Susan's smile vanished. Alex continued, I moved back here because I believe communities should be built on respect, not intimidation. I've already heard from residents who feel bullied by selective enforcement, like the woman fined for the color of her patio umbrella, or the neighbor who had to remove a bird feeder. This isn't governance, it's control. Susan's voice cracked through the room like a whip. This is inappropriate. He has no authority to speak on behalf of the HOA. Diane raised a hand. He's not speaking on behalf of the HOA. He's speaking as a resident, and he's within his rights. Susan's face flushed red, her fingers tightening around her clipboard. Alex turned to the room. We need leadership that serves the neighborhood, not lords over it. This isn't about a porch. It's about who we want to be as neighbors. This time, the applause was louder. Susan quickly gathered her papers and sat down. Seething, John leaned over to Alex and whispered, You just turned a HOA meeting into a rally. Alex smiled. Good. It's time someone reminded them this place belongs to all of us. Outside, as the meeting ended, a few neighbors stopped John on the sidewalk. About time someone stood up to her. One said, I'll be voting for your son. Another added. John looked up at his now empty porch, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel defeated. He felt ready. The morning after the HOA meeting, Maple Crest Estates was buzzing. Word spread for Alex Whitaker was officially running for HOA president. Some neighbors whispered it like gossip. Others cheered like it was long overdue. For the first time in years, Susan Bentley had competition. Real competition. John watched from his porch, now cautiously redecorated with just a small potted plant and an empty hook where the wind chimes once hung as. Alex typed furiously on his laptop. You're putting together a campaign? John asked, sipping coffee. Not exactly a campaign, Alex replied, just some facts. People need to know how Susan's been bending the rules. He was working on a flyer titled, Maple Crest Deserves Better. Bullet points included excessive fines, unapproved bylaw changes, and anecdotes from neighbors like Carla, whose patio furniture had sparked Susan's wrath. John nodded. Just keep it respectful. Don't stoop to her level. I won't, Alex said. But I'm not staying quiet either. That same day, Susan struck back. By noon, HOA-approved notice boards were plastered with glossy flyers featuring Susan's face, smiling beside the words, Experience, Order, Tradition, Re-elect Susan Bentley, Protect Our Community Standards. The reverse side, however, took a darker tone in faint, carefully worded paragraphs. It accused Alex of conflict of interest, suggesting that electing the son of a recent violator would open the door to personal bias and rule-bending. It called him young, inexperienced, and subtly questioned whether he understood what this neighborhood truly values. Alex read it, then handed it to John without a word. John scanned the page. She's twisting things. That's not just politics, it's fear. Alex nodded. She knows she's losing ground. But Susan wasn't done. 2 days later, John received yet another HOA notice. This time, unapproved string lights observed along porch railing. Immediate removal required. $50 fine if non-compliant. It was absurd. The lights had been there for years, warm little bulbs he used during the holidays. But Susan had chosen now to care. John felt his temper simmer. I'm going to the board, he growled. She's harassing me. But Alex held up a hand. No, let me handle it. That evening, Alex posted a video in the community Facebook group .com/direct and sincere. He spoke about leadership, fairness, and transparency. He ended it with, no, residents should feel afraid to decorate their home with care or dignity. I'm not running just to winning, running to fix what's broken. The response was electric. Dozens of comments poured in. Finally, someone who listens. I've been silent too long. You've got my vote. Susan fined me for wind spinners. The next day, Alex held a meet and greet in the park. He brought donuts and coffee, answered questions, and even took suggestions for revising outdated HOA policies. Susan, meanwhile, avoided public appearances, choosing instead to double down with more flyers and veiled threats about chaos if she lost. As election week approached, the lines were clear. Susan represented control and rigidity. Alex offered reason and renewal. On the final day before the vote, John and Alex took one last walk around the neighborhood. They passed freshly trimmed lawns, neatly painted mailboxes, and several porches with tiny symbols of quiet rebellion, wind chimes, porch flags, fairy lights. She's losing, John said. You can feel it. Alex glanced at his father. Because people are remembering this neighborhood is supposed to be a home, not a courtroom. They stopped in front of their house. John looked up at the empty hook. Think it's time to put those chimes back up? He asked. Alex smiled. Win or lose, think you should. Election day was just 2 mornings away. And the pressure was beginning to show, not on Alex, but on Susan Bentley. She had ruled the HOA for years, like a monarch with a rulebook instead of a crown, but now her grip was slipping. Every day, another neighbor shifted their support toward Alex. You could see it in their porches. Wind chimes returned, potted plants reappeared, and even a few porch flags fluttered in quiet protest. And Susan, she was furious. On a brisk Thursday morning, John opened his mailbox and groaned. Another letter, this one, hand-delivered and stamped urgent, claimed his porch light was violating brightness regulations, a regulation that hadn't been enforced in over a decade. Susan now claimed the light posed a visual safety hazard during dusk hours. John slapped the letter down on the kitchen counter. That woman is digging into rules nobody's enforced since Bush was president. Alex read it silently, jaw tightening. She's escalating. She's panicking. John corrected. This is her last play. Later that afternoon, a new wave of drama rolled in. Susan had posted a lengthy manifesto in the community Facebook group. It was a mix of fear-mongering and personal attacks, warnings of anarchy if someone unqualified took over, a claim that Alex was using his father's situation to stir dissent, and even a thinly veiled threat. The HOA was never meant to be a playground for families with personal agendas. Within minutes, the comments section exploded. Some neighbors supported Susan, mostly older residents used to her leadership, but the overwhelming reaction leaned against her. You're crossing a line. Alex has done more in 2 weeks than you did in 5 years. Stop harassing that man's porch. Susan, by dinner time, the post had been taken down reportedly by Diane, the acting HOA secretary, but the damage was done. Inside the Whitaker home, Alex sat at the dining table, silent for once, his campaign folder, open but untouched. John placed a hand on his shoulder. You good? Alex nodded, but the fire in his eyes had dimmed slightly. I didn't think she'd go this low, he muttered, dragging your name into it, twisting things. It's not just about the porch anymore. John leaned back. Nope, it's about what that porch represents. He gestured toward the window, where the dim porch light glowed defiant and warm. That light's been out there for years. That chair, those chimes, they're not decorations, they're normalcy. They mean freedom to sit on your porch without someone breathing down your neck. She doesn't see a porch, she sees a threat to her control. Alex sighed. I'm not running to win a fight anymore. I'm running to end one. Later that night, as the neighborhood quieted, a knock came at the door. John opened it and was surprised to see Carla, one of the quieter residents from the far cold sack. She held a small box. I heard what happened with the porch light, she said. Wanted to drop this off. John opened the box to find a brand new porch bulb. Soft amber, low wattage. Decorative, no offense, she added with a grin. But your current bulb is a little ugly. John laughed. Fair enough. Before she left, she turned to Alex. You've got this. Don't let her scare you off. We need someone who sees porches as places to live, not violations to fine. That night, John screwed in the new bulb and sat on the porch again, wind chimes back in their place. He looked out across Maple Crest and felt a shift. Susan had crossed the line, and now the neighborhood knew it too. Election day arrived with a quiet tension hanging over Maple Crest Estates. The air was crisp, the skies clear, but every mailbox seemed to hum with anticipation. Neighbors walked a little faster. Conversations at the mailbox were short, hushed. This wasn't just a vote, it was a reckoning. At the clubhouse, voting booths were set up beside the usual folding tables and coffee urns. The line stretched down the sidewalk, something no one had ever seen for an HOA election. John stood near the back of the room, arms crossed, eyes watching every movement. Alex was already inside, speaking with Diane and the rest of the board. Something was about to happen, and John could feel it. At 10 a.m. sharp, Diane tapped the microphone. Before we begin tabulating votes, both candidates have the right to make a final statement, she said. Susan, wearing her usual powder blue blazer and polished expression, stepped forward. She clutched a folder in one hand like it contained national secrets. I stand before you not to defend myself, she began, but to defend this neighborhood. For years I've maintained Maple Crest's reputation as one of the most orderly, peaceful communities in the county. And while some may call it strict, I call it secure. There were nods from a few of the older residents, but many in the room simply stared, arms folded, unmoved. Susan narrowed her eyes. I worry that turning over leadership to someone with no HOA experience, someone with a personal stake in undermining the rules, will send us into chaos. She smiled tightly. Thank you. Then she stepped back, clearly confident she'd delivered a finishing blow. Diane turned. Mr. Whitaker. Alex stood, calm, focused. In his hands was a folder thinner than Susan's, but far heavier in meaning. Thank you, he began. And thank you all for showing up today. This neighborhood matters to me, not because I grew up here, but because I believe it can be better. He held up the folder. What I have here, he said, are scanned copies of 4 HOA amendment documents, all filed and signed over the last 3 years. He stepped to the side, placing them on a projector screen. Each one altered existing rules ranging from porch decoration limits to violation enforcement procedures. All were filed under Susan Bentley's name. None of them were publicly voted on, and none of them were ever disclosed in the HOA newsletters. Gasps rippled through the room. She didn't just enforce the rules, Alex said. She quietly rewrote them. Susan shot to her feet. That's a mischaracterization. Were necessary adjustments. Without board approval, Alex countered, holding up HOA bylaws. Section 3.2 requires a majority vote for any regulatory change. Did that vote ever happen? Silence. Diane flipped through the folder, her face drained of color. These signatures don't match any board records. I wasn't even notified about this one, Susan stammered. It wasn't emergency authority discretion. It was control, Alex said simply. The room shifted, eyes turned cold. Even Susan's usual allies began to shuffle in their seats. One neighbor raised a hand. She'll find me under one of those new rules. Is that even legal? Another wait. My mailbox citation came right after one of these was signed. The room spiraled into murmurs and disbelief. Diane cleared her throat. Given these revelations, and until a formal audit is conducted, I motion to suspend all enforcement under the disputed amendments effective immediately. The board voted unanimously. Susan sat back in her chair, silent, her clipboard resting limply in her lap. Alex finished calmly. I'm not here to punish anyone. I just want this neighborhood to feel like a home again, not a place people fear over a potted plant or a light bulb. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, but it was genuine and steady. John smiled from the back. The porch fight wasn't just about the porch anymore, it was about the people taking their neighborhood back. For the first time in over a decade, Susan Bentley didn't show up for the HOA newsletter photo. Alex was officially declared HOA president, winning by a landslide to 83% of the vote, according to Diane. Residents had spoken loud and clear. They were done with petty fines, secret rules, and power-hoarding clipboards. Alex kept his first week in office low-key. No big announcements, no sweeping changes. Just a promise to review every bylaw and host a community forum where residents could help shape the new Maple Crest. It felt different. Peaceful. To peaceful. John sensed it before he saw it. Trouble doesn't always knock, sometimes it slithers in through the cracks, and this time it came in the form of a certified letter delivered to Alex from the county zoning board. He read it aloud at the kitchen table. Notice of appeal. A request has been filed for a zoning review of the property located at 119 Maple Ridge Lane, Whitaker Residence, citing possible non-compliance with setback regulations pertaining to porch structure. John stared at him. She did, Alex said, setting the paper down with a sigh. It was Susan's handwriting on the appeal form. She'd bypassed the HOA entirely and gone straight to the county, trying to weaponize bureaucratic technicalities after losing her crown. I rebuilt that porch in 2007, John muttered. Same size, same layout, permitted and approved. Alex nodded. Doesn't matter. The county has to follow up on any filed complaint. That means inspectors, forms, and delays. She's hoping the process alone causes enough trouble to humiliate you. John looked out the window at his porch. The wind chimes gently swayed, casting soft sounds into the quiet evening. That woman really doesn't know when to quit. But Alex didn't panic. He got to work first. He pulled the original permits. Thankfully, John kept a file box in the garage labeled home stuff, and buried inside were faded but official documents, stamped, signed, and dated. Then, Alex took it a step further. As HOA president, he introduced a temporary emergency amendment that would protect residents from retaliatory zoning abuse, giving the HOA the right to legally challenge any complaint made without substantial evidence or proof of intent to improve community welfare. At the next board meeting, he laid everything out. Let's call this what it is, Alex told the room. This isn't about zoning, it's about revenge. He held up the zoning appeal form. The complainant doesn't live adjacent to the property, hasn't reported a single concern about porch size in over 15 years. Only filed this 2 days after losing an election. Diane, now openly supportive, didn't hesitate. I motioned to file a formal HOA objection with the zoning office and support the homeowner in full. The vote passed unanimously again. Susan didn't attend. A week later, the county inspector came and went. He measured, took photos, and shrugged. Everything's legal, he told John. In fact, that porch is better built than most of the new ones going up. With a satisfied grin, John handed him a cup of lemonade. When the official clearance came by mail 3 days later, John placed the document in a fresh plastic sleeve and tacked it proudly next to the front door above it, a small wooden sign carved by a neighbor that read, Susan Frieso. That night, Alex and John sat outside together, sipping iced tea on the porch that started it all. She gave it one last shot, John said, rocking gently. She never stood a chance, Alex replied. Because the difference between us and her. John looked at him. We don't need power to feel important. The sun was setting behind the gentle hills of Maple Crest Estates, casting a warm golden glow across the familiar porches, flower beds, and quiet sidewalks. It was the kind of evening that reminded residents why they called this place home, a haven tucked away from the rush of the world. For John Whitaker, sitting on his own porch, the moment felt different now. Lighter gone were the days when every creak of the porch floorboards might bring a dreaded letter, or when the wind chimes sparked controversy. The porch was no longer a battleground. It was a sanctuary once more. Beside him sat Alex, his son, and the newly minted HOA president. The campaign, the tension, and the sleepless nights felt like distant memories, though both knew how recent and fragile their victory truly was. I never thought it would come down to this porch, John mused, tracing a finger along the wooden railing. Who would have guessed something so simple could mean so much? Alex smiled, taking a slow sip of his iced tea. Sometimes the smallest things hold the biggest stories. That porch was where you and Mom spent so many evenings. It's more than wood and nails, it's history. Our history. John nodded, swallowing a lump in his throat. It's funny, Alex continued, how Susan tried to turn it into a symbol of rebellion and disorder. But in truth, it was just a place where neighbors met, kids played, and people felt safe. Behind them, soft laughter and chatter floated from a small gathering nearby. Several neighbors had come by, drawn together by the spirit of renewal Alex had promised. The once divided community was healing, rebuilding trust, one porch light, flower pot, and friendly smile at a time. Diane approached carrying a tray of homemade cookies, her usual clipboard replaced by a relaxed smile. May I? She offered, handing a cookie to John. Thank you, Diane. It feels like we're turning a corner. She nodded. You're right. It's not just about rules or fines anymore. It's about community. And your family reminded us of that. As dusk deepened, John looked around at the familiar faces, young families with kids on bikes, retirees with gardening gloves, and friends sharing stories on porches. It was a different Maple Crest now, one shaped by respect and understanding, instead of fear. Alex stood, raising his glass. To the neighborhood, he said, to the porches that hold our memories, the neighbors who became friends, and the future we built together. Glasses clinked softly. John caught his son's eye and smiled. I'm proud of you, Alex grinned. Couldn't have done it without you. The porch light flickered on, casting a warm amber glow over the scene. And for the first time in a long while, John Whitaker felt truly at home.